The discussion about slave trade would be incomplete without mentioning one of the biggest atrocities that were committed by the slave masters and traders. I'm talking about the Zong Massacre.
Zong was an infamous slave ship that was owned by a Briton by the name James Gregson. It operated between the African coasts of Ghana and Caribbean islands, Americas, and Europe. On 6th September 1781, Zong left the coast of Ghana for Jamaica, and given the high demand for slaves in Jamaica at the time, the ship owners decided to board an effing 470 slaves, which was more than double the allowed number. The ship's captain, I'm talking about this bloke, Luke Collingwood, understood the grave risk that they exposed themselves to for overloading. The ship could drown in the enormous waves, or they could run out of supplies in form of water and food before reaching their destination. Anyway, back to this history. By 29th November 1781, that is 2 months later, the slaves and crew members started to get sickly due to ailments and malnutrition. Remember, the ship had carried more than it could accommodate, and the slaves had to share the little food rationing availed to them. Now the Zong is braving the Atlantic Ocean storms until they reach a region called the doldrums. At this point, the wind is at zero. Collingwood looks at the frightened people on board, but could not help. Over 50 slaves are cramped up in one place, breathless. They are dead. He turns his head to the other side, and 17 crew members are lifeless. Dang. Now Collingwood thinks to himself, what if we jettison some of this cargo? Perfect plan. With the help of the remaining but sickly crew, Collingwood threw a whooping 132 slaves who were too sick to survive. Problem solved. According to him, they had lost so much in terms of expected revenue from the sale of slaves. That should tell you the ship's captain Collingwood was operating from his boss's pressure. Before we proceed, take a half second and click the subscribe button. The insurance firm writer Thomas Gilbert tries to block the claim, citing that the ship had more than 420 gallons of water, which is close to 1,600 liters. According to him, this water was enough to sustain the slaves and the crew. The back and forth between James Gregson and the insurance company ended up with Gregson getting compensation for the accident. This particular judgment angered anti-slavery advocates such as Granville Sharp, who doubled their efforts in the crusade against the infamous trade. It was not until 50 years later Thus, the Slavery Abolition Act in 1833 abolished slavery in most of the British colonies. But we won't end this discussion right now. After the discussion on transatlantic slave trade, we will look at some of the hotspots where the slaves were detained before the journey of no return to the Americas, Caribbean islands, and Europe. We will close this chapter on slave trade by focusing on the Arabic slave trade, better known as the Indian Ocean slave trade in Africa.